Let's start at the beginning. At this very moment, somewhere in Tehran, an IRGC officer is looking at a map, not paper, digital, updated in real time. He knows how many American aircraft carrier groups are in the Persian Gulf. He knows what was discussed in a signal group, and he's calculating. You're going to understand exactly what he's calculating and why the number on his desk is the same one circulating in Washington. That number is 18,000. 18,000 American paratroopers. Tehran. An operation that was compromised before anyone even had the idea to plan it. Not in one area. Across 5 simultaneous layers, each amplifying the others. This isn't just about military capability. It's about the architecture of a strategic failure that begins before the first aircraft even takes off. Stay with me. Because by the end of this video, you'll understand why the number 18,000 isn't an invasion plan. It's a strategic signal. You'll understand the 5 vectors that compromise this operation simultaneously, and you'll understand why. When every layer of this compromise is documentable, the signal itself loses its power. This isn't speculation. This is strategic arithmetic, and it begins with what 18,000 actually means. So let's deconstruct it, layer by layer. The first layer begins with the instrument itself. The 82nd Airborne Division is the fastest forced entry force the United States has. This is a rigorous doctrinal definition, not a piece of PR. In 96 hours, it can project force anywhere on the globe. No other army in the world can do that. In 96 hours, American paratroopers can be on the ground in enemy territory before any other conventional ground combat unit can even deploy. The force has between 13,000 and 17,000 soldiers ready for immediate response. It is designed for one specific thing: rapid arrival, immediate impact, and the creation of bridgeheads. That sounds impressive. And it is. However, American military doctrine also determines with surgical precision. The 82nd is not an occupation force. It is not designed to take and hold a city. It is the tip of a spear, and a spear needs a shaft. Let me be precise about what that means in practice. The doctrinal mission of an airborne forced entry operation is to capture key terrain airports, bridges, communication centers, to create a bridgehead that allows heavier conventional forces to follow. What comes after the 82nd is what wins the war. The 82nd opens the door. Without follow-on forces, without logistical sustainment, without sustained fire support, the tip of the spear gets stuck in enemy soil with nothing behind it. Now, where does the number 18,000 come from? There is no publicly confirmed O plan, no operation plan with that number that the Pentagon has released or confirmed. The number is consistent with war game models from the RAND Corporation and the Center for Strategic and International Studies (CSIS) for forced entry scenarios in Iran. It's the number that emerges from Congressional Budget Office cost modeling for an Iranian ground combat operation. Analysts in Washington and at defense research centers worldwide use this number as a planning benchmark. So 18,000 isn't a plan, it's a modeling figure. And here's the first inconvenient truth of this equation. 18,000 isn't enough even for a sustainable forced entry against an adversary of Iran's magnitude. It's a reference number that begins the analysis. It doesn't end it. 18,000 is not an invasion force. It's a forced entry package. That's all they are. And you need to keep that in mind before you understand what's waiting for this package on the other side. The second layer, urban arithmetic, is where the number reveals its full insufficiency. That's the question the second layer answers. And the answer is brutal. Let's put those 18,000 on the ground. Let's assume the logistics work, that follow-on forces exist, and that the supply chain is intact. What awaits them in Tehran? Tehran has over 10 million inhabitants. It is one of the largest metropolises in Western Asia. It is wedged between the Alborz Mountains to the north peaks reaching above 5,000 meters and the Iranian Central Plateau to the south. The city's average elevation is approximately 1,200 meters. This terrain acts as an absolute operational constraint, far from being a mere geographical detail. The Alborz Mountains channel the air approach corridors. They turn the airspace into a funnel. And a funnel is exactly what an air defense system needs to maximize its effectiveness. When aircraft carrying paratroopers have no room to maneuver, they become predictable targets. But geography is only the beginning of the problem. The historical ratio required for urban conquest in modern combat is approximately 3 attackers for every defender in position. This is under conditions favorable to the attacker. In Mosul, in 2016 and 2017, American-trained Iraqi forces, with American air and artillery support, took 9 months to retake a city of 1,800,000 people. Against jihadist resistance, without the support of a nation-state, and without a coordinated national army. Can you calculate where that arithmetic leads when the city is Tehran, Fallujah in 2004, Grozny in 1994, Stalingrad? The list of urban battles that ground down forces far larger than those defending is long and consistent. The historical lesson has no exception. Defended cities are casualty multipliers for the attacker. Now think of a 40-year-old man, a high school teacher in Tehran during the week. On weekends, he trains. He knows the alleyways between the apartment blocks on his street better than any invader ever will. He knows which floor has a line of sight to which intersection. He doesn't need to win in the open field. He just needs the invaders to be unable to turn the corner. Multiply that man by hundreds of thousands. That is the Basij. The Basij is an urban paramilitary militia directly integrated into the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. The number of Basij members with some level of training or affiliation is estimated to be in the millions. Some estimates reach as high as 20 million people with some degree of potential mobilization. The active corps is smaller, but it is an urban resistance force trained specifically to fight invaders on Iranian soil. They know the streets, they know the buildings, they know the tunnels. They don't need to win in the open field. They need to survive in their own streets. Analysts from CSIS and RAND who modeled Iranian urban combat scenarios estimate a required force size in order of magnitude larger than 18,000 for any sustained control operation in Tehran. 18,000 against a city of 10 million. With a Basiji trained for urban resistance, in terrain that channels the attacker's approach vectors into predictable interception zones. This isn't a battle, this is an equation, and the equation doesn't add up. This leads us to the third layer. It is the most documented, being the factor that compromised the operation with a published date, time, and transcript. But urban arithmetic assumes one thing, that the force arrives with the element of surprise intact. This is where the third vector of compromise comes in, and it's the most verifiable of all. Airborne doctrine depends on one thing above all, arriving before the defender can orient themselves. You appear from the sky. You capture key terrain points before the enemy understands what is happening. You create facts on the ground before organized resistance can consolidate. This is the primary advantage of the 82nd. Speed, surprise, paralysis before arrival. Take away the surprise, and what you have is 18,000 paratroopers dropping on a city that is waiting for them. Imagine the scene. It's late at night in Washington. An experienced journalist sees a notification for a new group on Signal. He opens it. He starts reading. In 30 seconds, he realizes he is looking at the planning for an American military strike. Specific targets, attack sequences, time windows, the identity of decision makers. All discussed by national security advisors on an app anyone with a smartphone can download for free. He didn't hack anything. He didn't buy anything. He was simply added to the group by accident. This happened in March 2025. The Signal chat group, senior US, government officials, top-level national security advisors, discussing details of planning for airstrikes in Yemen on an unsecure communication channel, not a Pentagon channel, not a classified system, a commercial app. And a journalist was inadvertently added to the group. The leaked details included targets, attack sequences, time windows, and the identity of decision makers. Everything an enemy intelligence system would need to reconstruct the operational logic of an American attack. It wasn't a theoretical breach. It was a documented, public, and verifiable compromise of American operational planning at the highest level. Now put that in the context of Iran. The Iranian intelligence apparatus, the Vajra, Foreign Ministry intelligence, IRGC intelligence has spent decades mapping American signals intelligence vulnerabilities. They have access to Russian and Chinese partner systems. They have human intelligence networks in the Gulf, in Iraq, in Lebanon, places where American soldiers and intelligence officers have operated for decades. For Iran, the message of the signal incident wasn't about Yemen. The message was about the level of OPSEC discipline they can expect from American operations. And the answer that message delivered is not reassuring for Pentagon planners. If you are planning an airborne operation against Tehran, the operation that depends most on surprise among all forms of conventional force projection, and you have just demonstrated that your strike planning leaks into chat groups, your primary advantage is compromised. Not hypothetically, documentedly. That is what the title of this video means when it says, already compromised. It's not a metaphor. It's a fact with a published date and transcript. What is waiting for the force in the air corridor has a technical name, and it is the fourth layer. What is waiting for the force in the air corridor has a technical name, A2 Anno Domini, anti-access, area denial, anti-access, and area control. And what Iran has built in this dimension directly answers the question we just raised. For the paratroopers to reach the ground in Tehran, the aircraft carrying them must fly through Iranian airspace. And for that airspace to be open enough for a large-scale airborne operation, Iranian air defenses must be suppressed. This is what the U.S. military calls SED, suppression of enemy air defenses. You suppress the air defenses, create safe corridors, insert the transport aircraft, and the paratroopers jump. The sequence seems simple. It isn't. Take a look at the defensive arsenal Iran possesses. In 2024, Israel conducted strikes that partially degraded the Iranian air defense network, specifically the S-300 systems, the most sophisticated long-range air defense platforms in the Iranian arsenal. Degraded, not destroyed. And by mid-2025, there was evidence of partial reconstitution. But the S-300 isn't the only layer. The Iranian A2 Anno Domini architecture is designed in depth. Long-range ballistic missiles, capable of hitting U.S. aircraft carriers and regional bases, medium-range cruise missiles, swarms of drones adapted for strike missions, short-range point defense systems covering critical facilities. Each layer covers a different range and altitude. You can suppress one layer and still face three others. Now look at what the United States has in theater. In mid-2025, the aircraft carriers USS Harry S. Truman and USS Carl Vinson, with their full strike groups. The B-2 Spirits, pre-positioned in Diego Garcia. This is an impressive force. It's real, it's projectable, but keep these next numbers in mind, because they are the heart of the fourth layer. A Ticonderoga-class cruiser carries 122 missiles in its VLS, vertical launch system. An Arleigh Burke destroyer carries between 90 and 96. These are the interceptors available to defend the strike force while SEAD is being conducted. These missiles represent a finite inventory. When a ship's launchers run dry, they don't automatically replenish in the middle of a fight. The Iranian missile stockpile on land doesn't suffer from this shipboard capacity constraint. This is the arithmetic of saturation. You don't need every Iranian missile to hit. You just need enough of them to saturate the interception capability before the magazines run empty. And the Iranian inventory, ballistics, cruise missiles, converted drones, is designed precisely for that math. Operation Rough Rider, the American strikes against Houthi forces in Yemen, which began in March 2025, demonstrated in practice how much it costs, in terms of air sorties and munitions, to degrade a distributed and redundant air defense system. The Houthis are not Iran. The Houthi inventory is a fraction of the Iranian inventory. And yet, even with 2 carrier strike groups and weeks of combat sorties, the Houthis' ability to launch anti-ship missiles was not eliminated. Calculate what it costs to suppress Iran. And here is where the geographic constraint comes in. The Alborz Mountains aren't just a problem for the paratroopers, they're a problem for the aircraft carrying them. The air approach corridors to Tehran are limited by topography. Iranian defenders can concentrate their residual air defense systems on the vectors where American aircraft will appear. Geography amplifies the effectiveness of any defense that survives SED. For the airborne operation to work, You need sustained air defense suppression long enough to create a reliable insertion window. Iran knows what comes after said. An Iran that knows what's coming next prepares the reception ground. The question this layer plants, and which you will fully understand in the next one, is, what if the problem wasn't just reaching Tehran? What if reaching Tehran automatically triggered a war on other fronts at the same time? At this point, the mathematics of military force collapses. Iran is not an isolated actor. It is the central hub of a network of regional proxies with a doctrine of autonomous activation. This means they don't wait for orders from Tehran to take action. They have trigger conditions pre-programmed into their own doctrine. If Iran is attacked, the network fires. Look at what this network includes. The Houthis, in Yemen and the Red Sea. You've already seen the cost of suppressing their strike capability. 2 carrier strike groups, weeks of sorties, inconclusive results. Anti-ship missiles, strike drones, ballistic missiles launched from Yemeni territory. Despite all that, they kept operating. Hezbollah, in Lebanon and Syria. A separate arsenal of missiles and rockets estimated in the tens of thousands. Northern Israel under simultaneous missile pressure during any attack on Tehran. Israel responding, which opens another front that absorbs American attention and resources. The Iraqi Popular Mobilization Forces, the PMF. American bases in Iraq are within range of PMF rockets and drones. Every time the United States has attacked Iran or its allies, the PMF have responded. The pattern has no known exception, and beyond those, support networks in Syria, in Afghanistan, at pressure points across the entire region. Now think about the logistical problem this creates for the operation in Tehran. The 82nd on the ground needs continuous sustainment. Ammunition, fuel, medical supplies, spare parts, all of it must be transported. Airlift requires air corridors. These air corridors pass through regional American bases. These regional American bases are being attacked by Iraqi PMFs. The port you use in the Gulf is under threat from Iranian anti-ship missiles. Shipping in the Red Sea. The alternative supply route is being disrupted by the same Houthis that Operation Rough Rider failed to definitively suppress. The operation's logistics chain collapses under simultaneous distributed attacks. No part of this projection was invented for shock value. It exactly reflects the operational doctrine stated by Iran. Iran's deterrent strategy doesn't depend on stopping the United States on the battlefield in Tehran. It depends on making the cost of attacking Tehran unsustainable through simultaneous regional pressure on multiple points of American vulnerability. What would American planners need to conduct an airborne operation in Tehran while simultaneously suppressing proxy activation? Forces that do not exist in the mid-2025 posture. The question that remains open after this layer is more disturbing than any of the previous ones. What if the greatest risk isn't on the battlefield, but in what happens to the Iranian nuclear program while all this is unfolding? But there is one final layer, and it is the most consequential of all. In mid-2025, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, confirmed that Iran had enriched uranium to 60% purity. Let's put that number into precise context, because it is central to everything that follows. Uranium enriched for use in power reactors is between 3% and 5%. Weapons-grade uranium is at 90% or higher. 60% is not weapons-grade. But the technical distance from 60% to 90% is much shorter in time and effort than the distance from 3% to 60%. The enrichment infrastructure that gets you to 60% is essentially the same infrastructure that gets you to 90%. The IAEA estimated the breakout time. The time needed for Iran to enrich enough material for weapons-grade status to be weeks to months. As of mid-2025, enough material for multiple weapons, if enriched. That number weeks to months completely transforms the operational equation. A conventional American attack on Tehran now requires you to answer this question before the first missile is launched. What happens to the Iranian nuclear program during the operation? Iran's most sensitive nuclear facilities, Fordow and Natanz, are not conventional targets that are easily destroyed. Fordow is buried deep under mountains. Conventional bunker busters have no guarantee of destruction at that depth. The only American platform with credible capability against Fordow is the B-2 Spirit with the GBU-57, the massive ordnance penetrator, and even that weapon has depth limitations known and documented by analysts from RAND and CSIS. And here is the central paradox. What the operation is designed to prevent is exactly what the operation triggers. If you attack Tehran and don't guarantee the destruction of the nuclear facilities because you can't, with available means, you've created maximum pressure on the Iranian nuclear weapons program without eliminating it. You've given Iranian leaders the most powerful motivation imaginable to complete a weapon as quickly as possible. And Iran under attack, with no guarantee that its nuclear facilities have been destroyed, has maximum incentive and a minimum window to convert remaining material into weaponry. Military action is the greatest accelerator available for the exact decision the operation aims to prevent. This conclusion stems directly from the strategic calculus made internally by Pentagon analysts themselves. Open analyses from the Center for Strategic and International Studies identify this paradox as one of the fundamental constraints of any military operation against Iranian nuclear facilities. You aren't just trying to take Tehran, you're trying to take Tehran while suppressing proxy activation in 3 countries, while protecting a logistics chain under distributed attack, while conducting CD against a multi-layered A2 Anno Domini, with a force that doctrine says is not for occupation, all while trying to ensure the nuclear program hasn't accelerated while you were doing all that. This is the 5th vector, leading to the final dimension of the problem. It is in this diplomatic landscape that the picture complicates, in a way, headlines rarely capture. In April and May of 2025, while the aircraft carriers USS Truman and Vinson sailed through the Gulf and B-2s were pre-positioned at Diego Garcia, the United States and Iran were sitting at the table in Oman. Direct nuclear negotiations, the first significant direct talks in years. American and Iranian representatives in the same room, discussing the terms of a possible deal limits on the Iranian enrichment program in exchange for sanctions relief. With enrichment at 60% and the breakout window at weeks to months, what was on the table in Oman was, in practice, the difference between a controlled crisis and an existential one. You are building toward Tehran with one hand and negotiating in Oman with the other. Both things can be true at the same time. And within the framework of coercive diplomacy, they aren't contradictory, they're complementary. Military posture is the bargaining chip. You demonstrate capability and determination, create pressure on the adversary, and that increases the likelihood of concessions at the table. But here's the point that matters for the analysis you're following in this video. There's a question that Pentagon planners have been asking quietly for months, and it has become truly urgent. If the adversary knows as much as you do about the operation's limits, what's left of the signal's coercive value? The distinction between real invasion planning and strategic signaling as a bargaining chip doesn't reduce the operational compromise. If the architecture behind the signal is visible, if all the vectors of compromise documented in this video can be analyzed by any adversary with competent analysts, then the signal loses its coercive weight. The effectiveness of a military threat as leverage depends on the adversary's uncertainty about its viability. When viability is structurally in question, the threat loses its substance. It's necessary to note what we don't know. The outcome of the Oman negotiations after August 2025 isn't accessible from this point of analysis. The talks might have produced an agreement. They might have collapsed. They might be ongoing. What we can evaluate is the architecture as it existed in mid-2025. And the architecture, as you've seen in this video, is compromised. Go back to the question this video started with. 18,000 paratroopers. Tehran, the operation already compromised. You understand now that the answer isn't a failure. It's an architecture of failures. 5 layers, all simultaneous, all mutually reinforcing. Operational surprise is compromised, documentedly so. Since March 2025, when the U.S. government demonstrated that its strike planning cannot be contained at the level of high-ranking officials with smartphones. Not a theoretical leak. A leak with a date, a time, and a journalist in the group. The urban arithmetic doesn't add up. 18,000 against a metropolis of 10 million people, with a base EG specifically trained for urban resistance, in a terrain that funnels the attacker's approach vectors into predictable interception zones. Historical urban combat figures leave no room for an optimistic interpretation. The air corridor is contested. The Iranian A2 Anno Domini architecture, partially reconstituted after the 2024 Israeli strikes, has saturation capabilities that challenge the interception math of strike groups in the theater. Finite magazines against an inventory without that restriction. The logistics chain collapses. Because the network of Iranian proxies has a doctrine of autonomous activation. Because the demonstrated cost of suppressing just the Houthis consumed 2 carrier strike groups and weeks of combat flights without a definitive result. And because suppressing the Houthis, Hezbollah, and the PMF simultaneously while conducting an operation in Tehran exceeds the force posture available in any documented scenario from mid-2025. And the nuclear wildcard transforms the operation from the very first moment. Because 60% enrichment with a breakout window of weeks to months means that any strike that doesn't guaranteed destroy Fordo and Natanz is the greatest possible accelerator for the exact decision the operation aims to prevent. Here is the strategic truth this video exists to deliver. 18,000 paratroopers is not an invasion plan. It's a strategic signal. The function of a strategic signal is to create uncertainty in the adversary regarding the resolve and capability of the one sending it. This works when the adversary cannot calculate the attack's viability with enough precision to discount the threat. When the architecture behind the signal is analyzable, when every layer of compromise is documentable, verifiable, and based on public data, the signal loses its coercive density. And adversaries who have analysts and Iran has analysts run exactly that math. What to monitor going forward? The outcome of the Oman negotiations. Any IAEA report on enrichment above 60% or reduced inspector access, any additional reinforcements of strike groups or strategic bombers in the Gulf, the evolution of Houthi launch capabilities following Operation Rough Rider, and any further incidents of OPSEC compromise at the level of US operational planning. This isn't a simulation. This isn't a movie. This is the strategic arithmetic of the most consequential crisis of our generation. Keep watching. Stay informed. Because this story is nowhere near over. If this kind of analysis matters to you, subscribe now. The next video is already on your screen.